Welcome to Season 4, Episode 3 of Tech Talk Thursday. One of the great things that John Mitchell brought to IPC since he joined is that he has made things happen quicker, he's grown the organisation, and he's keeping pace with industry. The latest standard to be released is the IPC-610 H and also the J-Standard 001 H. And here to discuss these developments is Bob Doetzer and Jason Lambert from Circuit Technology. Welcome, gentlemen. Nice to see you today. So let's get started, and just maybe you could tell me, Bob, that the last standard release that we reviewed on Tech Talk was the IPC-610 GA and the J-Standard 001 GA, which was essentially addressing the automotive industry largely, and they were developed in unison. Is this the same case for the H revision? Is this being developed in unison with the J-Standard?
Yes, that's exactly correct. And just like with the automotive specs, which addressed the critical differences and uniqueness of the automotive industry, such as the vibration that automotive electronics is subjected to, and the thermal cycling, and the cleanliness standards that address that, the Rev H has come out in unison 600, 610, and J-Standard to be all used in conjunction with one another.
Just following up with Bob, some of the real key changes is the cleanliness, both in the J-Standard. As the components are getting closer together, for density on the PCBs, cleanliness from 70 years ago just isn't matching the cleanliness requirements of today's age.
That's interesting. I mean, because they have just revised a lot of the cleanliness requirements with the other IPC standards. So what elements of that have been brought into this H revision? Is it the SIR levels, or what has actually changed?
The ionic, the SIR levels, the ionic residue levels, more just strict cleanliness levels for those, the testing requirements. J-Standard H now includes the upper and lower limits, for test requirements and things like that are going to now, the companies are going to want to take a closer look at, for any in their failure analysis.
Right. So what are these upper and lower limits?
The residue limits, the upper and lower limits for the residues. It would depend on your, on your circuit card.
An important distinction here, Trevor, is that they don't necessarily say an exact 10 micrograms per square inch or an exact number. They use that as a guide and say that each individual circuit board manufacturer or assembler needs to look at their individual product, because it's very different today, as Jason was saying, the densities. So what might work well for company A and a cleanliness level for them may be a disaster for company B. So they have the guidelines and say that you have to present the empirical evidence from your product to say that this level of cleanliness is clean enough for my product, if that makes sense.
Right. All right. Okay. Does that not make things a little bit woolly? I mean, should they not be saying, well, if you're using this sort of pitch of components and that sort of thing, use this guideline, and if you're using a larger pitch, use this guideline? Would that not make more sense to do it that way? Why do you think they chose to make it kind of, it leaves room for ambiguity is really what I'm saying.
There's definitely room for ambiguity, and maybe some tighter guidelines or tighter recommendations might have been good, but there's so many factors that blend into the reliability, not only the pitch, but also the density of the parts to each other, and then also how long does your product live? There's 20-year life cycle LED driver boards, and then there's 2, 3, 4-year life cycle boards. So there's just so many factors that they give you the guidelines, they give you some parameters, and then you have to then adapt it to your specific product. And one good thing is, let's say you're a manufacturer and you've been building this product for 10 years. It's maybe not so common anymore as things change so fast. But if you've been building this product for 10 years and you don't have any cleanliness related failures over the last 10 years, then your cleanliness spec by default is good enough. So that ambiguity for that manufacturer is actually really good. So it's definitely more an empirical thing, if that makes sense.
Right. Well, I guess that would, it could strip out some, unnecessary or expensive testing, I guess, if you're already having success with that product. So how does the new policies and procedures affect the, current trainees? For example, for the CIS, CSE, or CIT courses?
I'll grab that one. For the CSE, there's not a whole lot of changes. There are some new definitions in the policies and procedures stating what is an active certificate versus a inactive or expired certificate for the CISs. Some of the bigger changes come for the CITs in that policies and procedures. The old policies and procedures stated that the trainers had to train 10 people in a 24-month period. That was hurting a lot of the smaller companies that don't have the large employee count that some of our major corporations do. So the CITs were having to come back and take the full lecture course every 2 years. And so the IPC reduced that number down to 5 students in a 24-month period, putting a little less burden on the CITs to fill that requirement for their every 2-year research. Some of the other ones was the new remote proctoring. They actually added the remote proctor guide and instructions for our soft skills, the lecture classes being 600, 610, and the 620. Unfortunately, the hands-on classes still have to be taught in person, but those are some of the small major changes in the policies and procedures for the CITs. The CIS really didn't change much, just the addition of those terms and definitions, what it means to be certified versus some other, the expiration times have been defined, and they also expanded on cheating irregularities. Not that I've ever seen a whole lot of problems with cheating, but they did add real defined terms of what cheating is for IPC now.
Wow, that's interesting. Okay, and so are there any other new specs or revisions that are on the horizon at the moment?
Yeah, there's not any eminent new specs, but IPC does come out with a new rev about every 2 years. So probably the next one is going to be the 7711. One other distinction with the Rev H is they've changed the modules for the 610 J-Standard and 600. So the modules are slightly different. And I don't want to get into the weeds of what each module is, but they have changed the modules. You can go on IPC's website or our circuittechnology.com website and see what those exact modules are. But they have changed the modules, and they've removed solderless wire wrap. So solderless wire wrap has been a legacy thing that's been in the specs for a long time, and just nobody's using it anymore. So I think it was time to put the gravestone on solderless wire wrap, which they did.
So I was just going to expand on that. The module changes, one of the great module changes I know some of the trainers are happy with the J-Standard is they broke up Module 1 into 2 different modules. Module 1 for J-Standard was very large in the Revision G, and so what they did was they almost split that module in 2, making it 2 separate modules instead of one large lecture, because for J-Standard G, the lecture was almost the entire day. And so they split that up into 2 pieces, and they did add some chart changes to the SMTs, just adding some different components and things like that. But one of the larger changes for the J-Standard was breaking up that Module 1 that was a very large module for the trainers to speak all day and the students to listen. So I know I've enjoyed the new H revision, and that split with the Module 1 just breaks it down into a more manageable learning sessions for the students.
Right, okay. Now, some of the areas I know that IPC is working on quite actively at the moment is things like counterfeit components, digital twins, and security. Do you get involved in any of that stuff at all?
We have not. It is certainly a very key area and something that IPC should be focusing their efforts on, especially with component shortages the way they are now. All of our customers are experiencing those component shortages and are affected by it. So the incidence of counterfeit components, in my estimation, is only going to go up. It's only going to become a bigger problem. So certainly that is something that IPC should be focusing on. And they are. They definitely are.
Yeah. And notwithstanding, of course, the problems that at the top end of the tree, some of the companies are having with the CMMC regulations for military applications. So, final question, guys, before I let you go. How has the new changes that have come in here with these revisions, how has that affected Circuit Technologies business? And more importantly, how has your business been affected over the last 12, 18 months with the COVID restrictions?
So, yeah, interesting question. COVID was very bad for the technical, hands-on training business, which is obviously what we are doing. So 2020 was a very bad year. 2021 has been gangbusters. I think, all the people that pushed off training in 2020 got exemptions from their customers because of COVID. Now they all want that training, need the skills. Combine that with business in general being very good. It's hard to find workers right now. So we are doing more and more training of people that have never been in electronics before, which is always interesting. And actually, Jason will tell you, all our trainers like that. They like somebody that's got no experience and can just open up this whole new world to them, because they're usually very anxious to learn, and they don't have preconceived notions. They don't have bad habits already. They don't think they know it all. So they're great students to train. So this year's been very good. We've actually hired another trainer because...
Is that right, Jason? It's like working with a clean sheet of paper. Yeah.
And actually in self-pays, folks that aren't company associated, they're wanting to come in, they're wanting to get the certs. They know, talking to their friends and family, that getting the cert is the bigger door opener into these companies that require these certs. So we've seen a very high volume of self-pay folks that come in from very different industries, whether it be different aspects of electronics or even just regular other jobs, being waitresses or wait staff or things like that. And we're seeing those self-pays and eager to learn. And those are the fun classes. The folks that they're hungry to learn. They want to learn, especially the hands-on skills. It's fun to teach folks that have never done the hands-on and jump into it, and it's exciting to see those new faces.
That's great. Are you restricted at all by the numbers that you can train at one time?
It's still the same numbers. The hands-on classes are still maxed out at 12, and the soft skills are maxed out at 15. Those numbers have stayed constant.
One thing to touch on with COVID too is IPC did change their policies as far as online training. Before COVID, there was no online training. Now, because of COVID, IPC is allowing online training for the soft skills classes. So 600, 610, 620 can be done completely online. And that really did help, especially last year, but it's continued on this year. People still want to do online training. So it's very convenient for the soft skills classes. The hands-on classes, which would be the J-Standard, still have to be done in person. But the soft skills can be done online. And that's been a big help for us.
Okay, I think that's something that's going to be here to stay, actually, is probably a certain degree of online training going forward. But there we go. So anyway, I want to thank you guys for coming in today, telling us about the updates to the 610 H and J-Standard 001H. Interested to hear some of the new policies and procedures, and we certainly wish you every success with your training activities from here on forward. So Bob and Jason, thanks for joining us today.
Global SMT and Packaging opens the windows of the world to bring you the latest news and technologies from Munich, from Bangalore, from Shanghai, from San Diego.